$14 million. That's not just a number whispered in financial circles or debated in legal memoranda. That's a sentence, a verdict, a reckoning that arrives not with fanfare or dramatic announcement, but with the cold precision of compounding interest and accumulated resentment. Somewhere in the exclusive hills of Montecito, California, behind wrought iron gates that once symbolized liberation and reinvention, a financial crisis is unfolding with the inevitability of a Greek tragedy. And at the center of this catastrophe stands a relationship between two men that has fractured irreparably. Prince Harry and Tyler Perry, the entertainment mogul who was once hailed as their guardian angel, their protector, their salvation during their darkest California hours. What began as an act of extraordinary Hollywood generosity in the spring of 2020 has transformed, through the passage of time and the accumulation of broken promises, into something far more complicated, something darker, something that will ultimately define not just their financial future but their historical legacy, alone, informal in structure, entirely undocumented in terms of traditional legal frameworks. A handshake between two men who believed themselves to be beyond the reach of conventional financial arrangements. A gesture rooted in friendship, in mutual understanding, in the assumption that when one billionaire helps another through crisis, no legal instruments are necessary, just trust, just the unspoken agreement between powerful men that their word is their bond. But friendships, like empires constructed on foundations of sand and illusion, eventually collapse under the inexorable pressure of time and changing circumstances. And this friendship has collapsed spectacularly. By the latter months of 2024, approximately 4 years after Perry had extended his initial generosity, a palpable shift occurred in the relationship. Calls from Meghan's representatives went unreturned with increasing frequency. Scheduled meetings were postponed indefinitely. Social media interaction ceased. The warm public displays of gratitude that had characterized their relationship in prior years evaporated entirely. And then came something far more damaging than confrontation: silence. The kind of institutional silence that suggests not merely disappointment, but active severance. The kind of silence that precedes devastation. The kind of silence that transforms a personal relationship into a transactional dispute. Tyler Perry, a man known throughout the entertainment industry for his loyalty, but equally renowned for his allergic reaction to being manipulated or utilized, went quiet. But quiet, for a man of his resources and institutional power, is never passive. It is methodical, it is strategic, it is the prelude to legal action. His personal finance team, composed of some of the most sophisticated banking and accounting professionals in the country, began the meticulous process of reconstructing every financial transaction, every wire transfer, every email exchange documenting the nature and terms of the arrangement, every text message that might provide evidence of the original understanding between Perry and the Sussexes, every promise made and every promise broken. The documentation process that ensued was thorough to the point of obsession. By the summer months of 2025, approximately 18 months after Perry's initial signals of displeasure, constitutional attorneys and tax specialists were formally incorporated into the process. Legal memoranda were drafted outlining potential pathways to recovery. Timelines were meticulously reconstructed. The informal arrangement, once sealed by nothing more substantial than a handshake and mutual understanding, was transformed into something far more concrete and actionable. What emerged from this forensic examination was a clear accounting of what Perry's team believed to be owed. The original loan amount. Accrued interest calculated at rates consistent with high net worth private lending arrangements. Additional penalties for what legal documents would later characterize as breach of trust and failure to execute on repayment commitments. The total figure that Perry's legal representatives calculated, $6.8 million, with the possibility of additional damages if litigation proceeded to discovery and trial phases. On the 8th of January, in the year 2026, precisely on the day when holiday festivities were receding into memory and institutional life was resuming its normal rhythms, Perry's legal team issued a formal notice of intent. The language was professional but unambiguous. Unless immediate resolution negotiations were initiated and substantial progress towards settlement was demonstrated within a defined time frame, formal debt collection proceedings would commence through the California civil court system. The implications were unmistakable to anyone with even rudimentary understanding of legal processes. Discovery would be initiated, financial records would be subpoenaed, communications would be examined. The entire architecture of Harry and Meghan's claimed financial independence would be subjected to forensic scrutiny. Harry and Meghan responded to this threat with a strategy that would ultimately prove catastrophic. They responded with silence. No official statement was issued. No legal team was assembled to negotiate settlement terms. No acknowledgement whatsoever of Perry's claims was made through official channels. There were no leaked statements to sympathetic journalists attempting to reframe the narrative. No social media posts attempting to galvanize public sympathy or cast Perry in an unsympathetic light. Just silence. Complete, comprehensive, and ultimately devastating silence. What that silence communicated to Perry and his legal representatives was not strength or confidence, but rather a state of profound incapacity. They did not possess the resources to mount an effective legal defense. They did not possess the liquidity to negotiate a settlement. They did not possess the institutional support that might have enabled them to weather a prolonged legal battle. The Montecito mansion itself, that 9-bedroom estate perched in California's most exclusive enclave, began to assume the character of a liability rather than an asset. Once hailed in tabloid publications as the symbol of Harry and Meghan's post-royal independence, the proof that they had successfully constructed a viable alternative existence outside institutional constraints, it now represented something far more tragic, the physical manifestation of a carefully constructed illusion that was in the process of complete collapse. What few external observers understood, however, was that the Perry situation was only one element of a far broader institutional reckoning that was simultaneously unfolding in multiple jurisdictions and across multiple fronts. On the 13th of January, 2026, the British monarchy made its institutional position unmistakably clear through the release of a formal statement originating from the Privy Council office at St. James Palace. The language was carefully crafted by constitutional lawyers and communications specialists to convey maximum legal and symbolic impact while maintaining the appearance of institutional restraint and dignity. The Crown, the statement read with surgical precision, did not acquire nor did it provide funding for the Montecito residence. The Crown has not engaged in any financial arrangement concerning the Duke and Duchess of Sussex since their formal withdrawal from duties. The Crown does not involve itself in private contractual disputes. 3 sentences. Not lengthy, not elaborate, but comprehensive in their institutional messaging. A complete and total severance of any potential legal or financial liability, a formal public declaration that the British monarchy would not function as a safety net for financial misadventures undertaken by members of the royal family who had voluntarily removed themselves from institutional structures and responsibilities. The statement constituted a response to communications that Harry had initiated through his legal representatives. On the 12th of November of the previous year, Harry had submitted a formal letter to Buckingham Palace. According to sources familiar with the contents, the letter was framed as an urgent appeal grounded in family loyalty and concern for the well-being of his children. It referenced security vulnerabilities. It alluded to the inheritance legacy established by Princess Diana. It proposed, with careful diplomatic language, that the Crown might consider extending financial assistance to help resolve the mounting pressures and liabilities that had accumulated around the Montecito property and the broader Sussex financial situation. The letter was, in essence, an appeal for institutional rescue, a request that the monarchy function as a backstop against the consequences of decisions that Harry and Meghan had made autonomously, free from royal counsel or institutional guidance. King Charles III, upon receiving this correspondence through appropriate channels, made a deliberate strategic choice. He did not respond directly to his son. He did not engage in the kind of private family negotiation that might have characterized royal family dynamics in previous eras. Instead, he transferred the entire matter to the Privy Council's Institutional Finance Committee, effectively transforming a personal family issue into an official constitutional matter. In a private comment to his senior personal secretary, a remark that would subsequently circulate through palace corridors with the inevitability of such things, Charles is reported to have said, "If he wishes to rename his children, that is his cross to bear, but he will not barter them for royal privilege." The statement was characteristically austere in its deployment of language, but it communicated something far more profound than mere financial judgment. It suggested that from the Crown's perspective, Harry's approach to the situation represented a form of emotional coercion, an attempt to leverage family bonds and paternal concern for minor children as a means of extracting financial assistance that would not otherwise be forthcoming on merits or institutional policy. The monarchy, in other words, viewed the request not as a desperate plea from a struggling family member, but as a calculated bargaining tactic, and it was not going to negotiate under such circumstances. By the 2nd of January 2026, King Charles had made a public address at Sandringham, the royal residence where he traditionally delivered his New Year's remarks. The speech, carefully composed and extensively edited before delivery, contained a passage that observers both within palace circles and among the broader public understood to carry direct reference to the Sussex situation. "You do not save a house," Charles said, with the kind of measured gravity that comes from decades of observing institutional dynamics, "by reopening a collapsed wing. You seal it off and rebuild elsewhere." The metaphor was unmistakable. The monarchy would not expend institutional resources attempting to rescue branches of the family tree that had deliberately severed themselves from the trunk. The focus would instead be directed toward the future, toward the construction of institutional frameworks that did not require ongoing management of past failures or ongoing remediation of decisions made without royal counsel. Princess Anne, widely regarded within palace circles as the institutional backbone of the modern monarchy, had meanwhile been instrumental in developing what palace insiders now refer to as the legacy lockdown policy. This was not a formal written document with signatures and official seals. Rather, it constituted a framework of institutional understandings regarding how various royal households would manage their relationship to all matters Sussex-related going forward. The directives that emerged from Anne's consultation with senior palace officials were comprehensive in their scope and uncompromising in their implementation. All references to Archewell Foundation would be removed from official royal charity documentation. Collaborative requests from organizations with financial ties to Harry or Meghan would be systematically rejected. The Sussex children, Archie and Lilibet, would be administratively removed from succession planning documents pending completion of what palace officials euphemistically referred to as bloodline verification procedures, a phrase with deeply troubling historical implications that nonetheless reflected genuine institutional concerns about paternity and legitimacy. At a closed-door session convened at Clarence House on the 15th of January 2026, Princess Anne articulated the institutional philosophy underlying these policies with characteristic directness. According to sources present at the briefing, she stated, "We will not be bound by emotional extortion. Our duty is to the Crown, not chaos. The institution exists to serve the nation, not to absorb the consequences of poor personal judgment by individual members." The influence that Anne wielded in establishing these parameters remained decisive throughout the subsequent weeks and months. Her role as the enforcement mechanism for institutional discipline meant that no senior royal would deviate from the established framework without risking her particular brand of institutional disapproval, which was far more consequential than any formal sanction. Prince William, the heir to the throne and a man increasingly assuming active leadership roles in institutional governance, made his own institutional position unmistakably clear on the 13th of January 2026, when he faced a gathered group of senior journalists at Clarence House. His tone was measured and professional, but his message carried implications far beyond the immediate context of the Perry situation. "There's no trust left," William stated, with the kind of judicial precision that suggested these words had been carefully chosen and extensively deliberated. "We do not reward coercion." When pressed by journalists regarding the status of Archie and Lilibet within royal succession planning, William delivered what would become one of the most quoted remarks of the entire Sussex crisis. "If Harry prefers the Markle name, that's his decision. But with that comes clarity and final detachment." The implication was clear. If Harry wished to remove his children from the Sussex dukedom and establish them under whatever alternative name he preferred, the Crown would not contest such decisions. But with such choices came complete institutional separation. No titles. No inclusion in formal royal documentation. No suggestion that such children retained any connection to the House of Windsor or its associated privileges and protections. William, in collaboration with Princess Catherine, had also issued directives to all institutions and organizations within their purview regarding the management of Sussex-related matters. All references to Archwell Foundation were to be removed from materials associated with the Earthshot Prize. The Center for Early Childhood, an initiative with which Catherine had become deeply identified, was to completely sever all affiliation with any Sussex-related charitable entities or organizational structures. Behind William's steely institutional pronouncements lay the considerable strategic influence of Princess Catherine herself. While Catherine maintained her public persona as the serene and compassionate face of modern monarchy, palace insiders understood that she had become increasingly instrumental in the development and execution of institutional communications strategy, particularly regarding matters related to image management and reputational protection. In private briefings with William and the communications team at Sandringham, Catherine had articulated what would become one of the defining philosophical principles guiding royal family response to the Sussex crisis. "You can mourn a sibling, but you must never mourn the monarchy for them." It was Catherine who insisted, with the kind of quiet authority that comes from someone who understands institutional dynamics at a profound level, that the Center for Early Childhood completely sever all organizational connection to Archwell Foundation or any entity with which Harry or Meghan were associated. It was Catherine who championed the phraseology that would subsequently appear in formal speeches, official briefings, and press releases. Legacy must be earned. She was simultaneously consolidating what she termed authentic royalty. While Meghan had attempted to appropriate the symbolic trappings of royal status without the substantive commitment and institutional loyalty that such status demanded, Catherine was demonstrating that true royal authority derived not from appearance or public perception, but from demonstrated commitment to institutional values and social service. At the January Commonwealth Trade Forum, Catherine had appeared in a dress featuring Queen Victoria's Oriental circlet, a piece of jewelry with profound historical significance. Her global soft diplomacy initiatives, her demonstrated engagement with social issues ranging from early childhood development to mental health advocacy, her careful cultivation of relationships with international leaders and institutions, all of these constituted a systematic demonstration of what authentic royal duty actually entailed. By mid-January 2026, the Tyler Perry legal situation had escalated toward formal court proceedings. Perry's legal team had prepared comprehensive documentation for filing in the Superior Court of Los Angeles. The anticipated damages sought included the original loan amount, accrued interest calculated at rates consistent with high-net-worth private lending arrangements, and substantial additional damages accounting for breach of trust and the documented failure to execute on repayment commitments. The figure being prepared for submission, $6.8 million, with the clear indication that if discovery proceeded to trial phases, additional damages related to emotional distress and reputational harm might be pursued. Harry, last observed in California on the 16th of January, had not issued any public statement regarding the impending litigation. Meghan's communications team had maintained complete silence. No tweets, no Instagram posts, no Archwell Foundation press releases, no attempt whatsoever to manage public narrative or mobilize sympathetic media outlets. The Montecito mansion itself, once positioned as a symbol of post-royal independence and self-made success, was quietly being listed through private real estate consortiums that specialized in marketing distressed celebrity properties to carefully vetted potential buyers. The asking price had been substantially reduced from the original $14.65 million purchase figure. Potential buyers, when they materialized at all, were reportedly discouraged by the reputational liabilities associated with the property and the visible signs of institutional abandonment now surrounding the Sussex situation. What few external observers understood, however, was that the financial crisis represented only one dimension of a far more comprehensive institutional reckoning that was simultaneously unfolding with devastating efficiency. The gates of Montecito closed not with ceremony or dramatic fanfare, but with the quiet inevitability of foreclosure notices and legal paperwork accumulating on mahogany desks in law offices across Los Angeles. Harry stands alone in rooms that once promised liberation, redemption, and the construction of a life entirely separate from institutional constraints. The California sunshine that flooded through those windows in happier times now illuminates only emptiness. The gardens that were carefully manicured and photographed for glossy magazine spreads have begun to show signs of neglect. The infrastructure of privilege is dismantling itself piece by piece, document by document, as financial reality replaces the carefully constructed narrative of independent success. Somewhere in the distance, Tyler Perry's telephone rings in the offices of his attorneys. Another court filing is prepared, another deadline approaches, another opportunity for settlement passes without response or acknowledgement. The British monarchy, meanwhile, has moved forward with the kind of institutional efficiency that comes from centuries of managing succession, crisis, and the protection of systemic interests above individual sentiment. Prince William oversees the future with Catherine at his side. Princess Anne continues her work protecting institutional boundaries. King Charles watches from Sandringham, secure in the knowledge that his decision to refuse rescue has been vindicated by subsequent events. The institution rebuilds itself elsewhere, focusing resources on those who understand that duty is not negotiable and that loyalty cannot be weaponized for personal advantage. The boy who ran from duty discovers, too late, that freedom purchased through betrayal and constructed on foundations of deception is simply another form of captivity. More isolating, more complete, more final than any palace could ever impose. And in Hampshire, in a modest home far removed from the California dream, Harry writes letters he will never send and remembers a time when he believed that love could substitute for honor, that emotion could replace institutional discipline, that the crown could be escaped without consequence. It could not. The price, as it always is, was paid in silence.